Paradox Rift is about to come out in the Pokemon trading card game. And while it's a very good set, it is completely overrated. So to start out, let's talk about Gerra. Has the ability to prevent all damage counters from being placed on your bench Pokemon by effective attacks used by opponent's basic Pokemon. So essentially, it's a Sableye counter. If Lost Box tries to use Sableye to your bench, it's not going to do anything. So people think, well, this kills Lost Box because you put down this and Manaphy to prevent damage. They can't use Greninja or Sableye on your bench. So you just win, is what people say. You beat Lost Box automatically. And that may seem like it would make sense, except for the fact that no deck has that much bench space except Lost Box. You play Guardy. If you don't get enough Guardies up, it doesn't matter if you're blocking your damage on the bench against Lost Box, you're still not going to be getting ahead on the prize trade. You're just evenly trading with each other. And Lost Box probably gets a first attack if you're making room for both Jirachi and Manaphy. Chien-Pao needs room for Bibarel and Baxcalibur. Miraidon needs room for a variety of stuff. Plus, Miraidon doesn't really want Manaphy and Jirachi anyway. It doesn't need those. And pretty much every deck can't fit it. Lost Box can, though, because Lost Box is allowed to play with lower bench. But if your Lost Box counter is only in Lost Box, is it really a Lost Box counter? Or is it just like a mirror tech? Because it's not played in anything else. There's no room on your bench. Therefore, this is overrated, doesn't kill Lost Box, drives me crazy when people say that. Next card that is overrated, Iron Hands EX. I've talked about, or I've heard a lot of people at least say this will completely take over the meta. That is completely wrong. So, for a Lightning and 3 colorless, it does 120, and if your opponent's active is knocked out, you take an extra prize. This seems amazing against Lost Box, turns what would generally be a 1 prize knockout into a 2 prize knockout. The problem is, no matter what you're knocking out, you're probably going to be knocked out in return for the same amount of prizes since you give up 2. You knock out a Comfey with this, Lost Box comes swinging back with Dragonite pretty consistently and knocks you out for 2 prizes. It's even. The other issue is it costs 4 energy. So even if you're in something like Miraidon, it's really hard to power up. You can get 4 energy, but it's going to be later game when Lost Box almost certainly has a Dragonite to come back with because of how late in the game it will be. It's just not that consistent. I've heard people say that it would make sense to maybe play 2 Iron Hands in a deck to really beat Lost Box, but you're never going to get 4 energy on there twice. It's too much. Or I've also heard people say that you can get a turn 2 attack with this and Lost Box won't be able to respond. Which also doesn't make sense because it's so expensive. Miraidon is not quite as inconsistent as it might seem sometimes. Turn 2 attacks are missed pretty often, and when you increase the energy cost to 4, it's very rare you're going to hit it. Plus, even if you do get the turn 1 attack, Lost Box, especially Turbo Lost Box, is consistent enough to hit you back for a knockout. So it helps your Lost Box matchup and some other matchups, but it doesn't turn them from horrible to favorable. You're still disadvantaged against Lost Box if you're playing Miraidon. And if you play this anything else, which is probably the best way to play it, you're still not doing too much. Makes most decks better, but it's not as good as people think it is. Next up, Roaring Moon. People think this is amazing, you know? It seems good, because you can literally knock out anything. Just knock out your opponent's active, do 200 yourself. Or if there's a stadium in play, you can do 220. Both for 3 energy. That's where the problem arises. Dark boxes don't have any good attackers, really, other than Roaring Moon. And if you want to attack with it, you need Dark Patch, which is very hard to use. It only gets 1 energy at a time when you need 3. So by the time you're finally attacking with this, your opponent's probably taken a few prizes. And that's not ideal because you take a knockout, put 200 on yourself. Now you got 30 HP left, you're going to be knocked out in return, and now it's even, except you took so long to get set up, so they're actually ahead. It's not ideal. I hear people say it's a finisher because it can one-hit something late game. But in order to power it up, it's got to be late game. It's just overall weak. You can also play it in Lost Box, which actually seems really good because Mirage Gate can power it up. It's almost like similar to Dragonite. But the problem is Lost Box really likes their Forest Seal Stone, which you can't attach to a Roaring Moon. And you're not playing any Dark types because if you were, there's no good Dark Vs to go with it. Maybe Galarian Moltres V for your Seal Stone, but even so, that's so weak. So just overall, Roaring Moon has a really strong attack to knock out anything, and might be good in the future with high HP EXs, but right now, you're just evenly prize trading. 2 prizes for 2 prizes. Same issue with Iron Hands, sadly. Next up, Gold Dingo EX. Sorry for the low quality image, but 260 HP, pretty big, stage 1. And the ability Coin Bonus. Once per turn, you may draw a card, or if it's active, draw another. Then for 1 Metal Energy, you discard any number of basic energy from your hand, do 50 for each one you discard. People sometimes say this is better than Chien Pao. And I see why, because it is relatively easy to get your numbers up, especially because you don't have to attach the energy. The problem is, it's a stage 1, which doesn't seem that bad, but it means you can't fit a draw engine because you got a stage 1. So if you want to fit a draw engine, it's going to be kind of inconsistent to do so, but most people don't, because this has a draw engine built in. But the draw engine built in is also shut off by Path to the Peak. So if Path to the Peak goes out, you can get really, really stuck in this deck. It's just really hard to make it past Path to the Peak. And being a stage 1 makes it slow. Another issue of this compared to Chien Pao, which is what everyone's comparing it to, Chien Pao has Radiant Greninja plus Canceling Cologne, which beats Lost Box. Here, I don't see what you're doing against Lost Box. Gimme Ghoul, what he evolves from, has 40 HP. Sableye can knock out 3 of those at once. And then you're in big trouble. So overall, it just doesn't do that much. Sure, it does 50 for each energy, but so does Chien Pao. And it does 60, even if you do have to attach his Baxcalibur. Just has so much more options with Chien Pao, so much less with this, so much more straightforward. You're shut off by Path. I would not play this. But I wouldn't be surprised if it makes a top 8 at some point. We'll see. It probably gets better post-rotation. And finally, Iron Valiant EX. This one's not as talked about, but I've seen a lot of people say to put it in Guardy. Because its ability, once per turn, when it moves to your bench to the active spot, you may put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. But that's kind of confusing to me. People say you put it in Guardy, but that doesn't even work because you have to become active. In Guardy, you would want to be attacking with something else, and you're not playing many ways to switch. Which means if this becomes active, you're never getting back to the bench because you're not playing any way to switch, and you're forced to attack with this, which only does 200 damage. Plus it's a 2-prizer, which is a huge issue in this deck. With Guardy, if you're attacking with a 2-prizer, you want to take a big knockout with Zacian, which is overall better. This, it's doing 220 essentially, because it moves to the active, hits for 200. You're not moving it back to the bench because you don't have enough way to switch. But Zacian just 1 hits. So this is overall very weak, except in Expanded. There's an interesting way in Expanded where you can use Scoop Up Net to pick it up and switch between a bunch of those. Video coming soon. But, led to Scoop Up Net being banned. So maybe, or at least in Japan, so maybe it's alright. But only in Expanded. In Standard, it's completely overrated. Anyway, overall, Paradox Rift is a very good set. But all the cards in it people think are amazing need to be toned down a little bit. If you enjoyed, comment below about your opinions on Paradox Rift. Tell me if I'm wrong, tell me if you agree. And be sure to like and subscribe. When you subscribe, be like Iron Hands and use arm press on that subscribe button.